Hey, good afternoon. So this is going to be the notes over Achilles in Vietnam, Chapter 3. The chapter is entitled Grief at the Death of a Special Comrade. And of course, in context, this is going to come right after, in our story, the death of Patroclus at the hands of Hector outside the city walls of Troy. And so, of course, Dr. Shea is going to use the events of the Iliad to sort of shed light on the plight of just a regular average American soldier in the Vietnam War. And so we're going to look a little bit closely at the grieving process, how that may have been interrupted in Vietnam. So first we need to talk about a soldier's love for special comrades. Shea uses the Greek word philos to talk about this. Philos is love, but it is not in the sexual sense. In English, we use the word love for all kinds of different meanings. Oftentimes, we say that we love things, and it's not really using the same amount of emotional depth that we mean for other things when we say love. Like, I love my wife, and I also love shrimp and grits. Now, I love my wife in a completely different and much deeper way than I love shrimp and grits. And so for the Greeks, they would have different words for love. The word philos is not sexual, is not romantic in any way at all. It's like a comradeship or like a brotherhood. The word friend is close to the meaning, but friend isn't strong enough to describe the special relationship. And so Shea writes in Achilles in Vietnam, Achilles' grief for Patroclus would not have been greater had they been a sexual couple, nor less if they had not been. So the death of Patroclus is a huge event in Achilles' life, and it really deeply affects him because of just the strength of their bond, of that philos, of that love between people that is stronger than a friendship and isn't necessarily romantic at all. Shea goes on to talk about the term he calls the particularity of the person. So Achilles witnesses lots of people dying. He takes the lives of lots of people. However, he is most effective when Patroclus is killed. It is particular to Patroclus. And so there's this idea that, yeah, Patroclus is dead and there are other Myrmidons. Why can't Achilles just have another Patroclus, another philos relationship with another Myrmidon? And that's where this idea of particularity comes in. Patroclus cannot be replaced. The special comrade cannot be replaced. He is one and only one, and when he is gone, that relationship cannot be replaced. Someone cannot fit into that slot. So lots of soldiers in Vietnam had a particular relationship with another special comrade. And if that special comrade would be injured and taken back home or would be killed, then that soldier who was so close to them would be absolutely emotionally wrecked. It would be incredibly difficult for them to get past that. Because of that, lots of soldiers would never try to attempt to have close friends because they know when you were close to someone, then there was a possibility that any waking second that they could get killed. And so for that reason, lots of soldiers would not even risk getting close, would avoid being social at all. But that particularity is very important to understand just why Achilles can't get over the death of Patroclus. It's a big deal for him. So moving on to talk about Patroclus himself, the Iliad characterizes him as different from all of the other soldiers. He has a certain gentleness. While Patroclus and Achilles are sitting out the war because Achilles is angry, Patroclus goes, and he goes behind the lines where the Greeks and the Trojans are fighting, and he sees lots of soldiers, Greek soldiers that are wounded, and this deeply bothers him. He goes back to talk to Achilles with Nestor's advice. Hey, let me take the Myrmidons back into the war wearing your armor. Please let me do that. And so that shows that Patroclus is gentle. Yes, he is a cold-blooded killing machine in the war, especially when he goes out and he fights, but there's a gentleness to him. He shows concern for other people. And so in Vietnam, when soldiers would lose a special comrade, especially if he had that gentle nature, it would be even more traumatic for them. We see Patroclus stopping, caring for wounded soldiers, literally practicing like medical skill to help out soldiers. And then when Hector kills him in front of the walls of Troy, that death is even more tragic because he is so gentle. We have Greeks and Trojans are all moved. Come here. You want to make a cameo? Sure. Okay. They're all deeply moved by Patroclus' death. Even the gods are deeply moved. Also, this is my beautiful wife, Sarah. I love her. She just got home.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah. All right. So when Patroclus is killed, the Greeks, the Trojans, and the gods are all deeply moved. In fact, we even get one point while they're fighting over Patroclus' body that the soldier literally stops mid-fight and he's moved to tears because he's seen Patroclus, or rather, he's seen Patroclus' body. Finally, we need to talk about the maternal instinct. Maternal, of course, means mother. Instinct is that instinct that a mother is supposed to have to care for their own. And so, when a soldier would have a special comrade, they would have that maternal instinct. They would protect and look out for each other. Like, you have my back, I have your back. Always worrying about that other person. And so a soldier is supposed to care about the entire unit, but oftentimes when a soldier would have this philos relationship with another one, that special comradeship, they would have a maternal instinct of caring not just for the entire unit, but specifically for that one special person. So, of course, in war, people are killed, and when that special comrade is killed, the soldier who was left feels the pain that is almost similar to losing a child, is the way that Shea's veterans describe it. They also feel like they are a child losing a parent because that relationship is so close, is so maternal, and when that person is killed, then the loss is traumatic and incredibly difficult for the person to come to grips with, to come to terms with. So when Achilles is finally told about the death of Patroclus, the death of his special comrade, he has a very strong reaction. We're told that initially he turns to self-harm. We're told in the text that he begins to tear his hair. He is just absolutely devastated by this happening. And so his reaction is mirrored by what happened to veterans in Vietnam when they would lose their special comrade. He doesn't want to eat anymore. He can't sleep. He turns to self-harm, and so these are patterns that would be repeated by soldiers in Vietnam when a special comrade would die. What's most interesting, though, and most sad, is that we get language that suggests that Achilles is already dead. There's a dark cloud hovering over him. And no, he's not actually literally dead. He feels like he has died because Patroclus has been killed. And so this language is also mirrored by Shea's by the veterans that Shea works with. Some of the quotes that I pulled from the text are really interesting. It says, "I died in Vietnam." And of course, that is coming from a veteran who has come home, who is working with Shea. But he feels like he has died there. Another one says, "And it wasn't that I couldn't be killed. I didn't care if I was killed. I just didn't care if I lived or I died. I just wanted blood. I just wanted revenge, and I didn't care. I didn't see myself going home. No, I didn't." That indifference to surviving the war, to going home after the war, it doesn't matter to that soldier because it feels like they have died. That deadness, that losing of emotions, that numbness is a key trait in what happens to Achilles and what also happens to these soldiers in Vietnam when their special comrade is lost. So that is a major part to understanding what happens to Achilles and to these soldiers. So another big factor and sort of the psyche of the American soldier and the soldiers in the Trojan War is this ability that once a special comrade has been lost, this ability to communalize grief, the communalization of grief. We'll call this grief work. Grief work is the opportunity to process events, to express to others emotions about events. So the ability to process the loss of a special comrade, the ability to speak to others, to express to others the difficulty, the emotional turmoil of losing that special comrade. And of course, in Vietnam, most of your average ordinary soldiers did not get the ability to communalize their grief, to do this grief work, to process their grief. Elites, however, almost always did. And so Shea points to the Iliad, and he says communalization is virtually guaranteed and automatic when someone as powerful as Achilles grieves. And so Achilles is an elite soldier in this war. And so when he loses his special comrade, he of course is granted the ability to communalize. The powerful have a huge advantage over the less powerful or the powerless to grieve. So there were lots of factors that came into play, and we're going to compare them from Vietnam and Troy. So one question is, who brought the dead to the rear? In the Trojan War, the Iliad shows us closest comrades, the dearest people that had lost their special comrades, bringing their loved ones back, literally back from the spot where they fell, where they were wounded. And so that, of course, is a huge moment in the ability to process that intimate trying to care for the person by bringing them back. Now in Vietnam, when a person was killed, oftentimes a crew would fly in. Sometimes the body would literally be lifted up into a chopper and flown away. And so oftentimes there's examples that Shea talks about where a person would lose their special comrade, the special comrade would be killed, and their body would be gone before they had even known about it, before the surviving friend would even know that the special comrade had been killed. So another factor is, when were the dead mourned? Of course, this is a huge factor. You have to have time to do that grief work, to mourn. And so in Troy, the fighting, the combat stops every day at night. The soldiers go back into camp. And so, of course, there's no fighting. They're not in danger in that moment. And so grieving can be done at night. The funerals that take place in the epic take place at night. Now in Vietnam, due to the nature of the war, combat never stopped. The soldiers were always had to be on their toes. In fact, nighttime is one of the primary times when fighting would occur, as opposed to in the daytime. And so if fighting never stops, if combat never stops, the soldier is never able to actually stop and grieve when their special comrade is killed. Now another factor is the ability to weep. By weeping, I mean crying. So in Troy, or in the Trojan War rather, for the Greeks and the Trojans, crying, weeping is part of the culture. It is a natural thing to do, to cry at the loss of that special comrade, of a loved one. But in the Vietnam War, American soldiers were actively discouraged against crying. It's seen as unmanly. They're told not to do it, told to get over it. Okay, get yourself together. Do not have these emotional outbursts. And of course, crying is a big emotional release. And so when a person is unable to cry, it still brings, stores away that emotional turmoil. And it's difficult and causes that grieving, when it does happen, to be even more painful. Final factor we're going to talk about is the care for the dead body. So in the Trojan War, soldiers, of course, we talked about would be active in bringing back their special comrade from the front lines, from where they had fallen. And after that, we get descriptions of really long, elaborate, intimate caring for the body of the dead. Achilles takes care of the body of Patroclus after he is killed. In fact, this taking care of the deceased body is such a big deal that Patroclus's funeral and the events leading up to it, the caring for the body, is an entire book of the Iliad. Achilles is intimately involved. He takes care of Patroclus's body. But in Vietnam, soldiers, of course, were not given the opportunity to have that emotional connection with the body, and that's a modern thing as well. If you think about when a person passes away, their family and their very, very, very close friends are invited to a viewing before it's open to the public. But in Vietnam, there was no opportunity for that. A body would be flown away from combat immediately. And oftentimes when soldiers would not be in the middle of fighting, leaders would hardly acknowledge the death of comrades. There would be list, okay, this person was killed, that person was killed. Oftentimes, there's no moment of grief on the part of the leaders. There's no acknowledgement of the sadness, of the emotional toll of what has happened. And of course, that takes a big toll on the soldiers, and it's a steep price for them to pay. So Shea ends this chapter talking about once that grieving process is finished, the death of the special comrade severely traumatizes the soldier. And so he ends with a quote from a veteran in his group, and he says, "I was like the night of the living dead after that." Of course, that's a really famous, almost zombie movie. And so when you are like the night of the living dead, it's almost like you are a zombie. So there's some pretty important things that I hope you caught in the notes. The first is philos, particularity, the maternal instinct, that numbness that comes with the special comrade is killed, that feeling of being dead, communalization, and then make sure that you have the comparison of Troy and Vietnam. That's important as well. So the phrase that I would like for you to put in the discussion post, that key phrase to show that you actually watch the entire recording, is every time I use schmoops, a child drops his ice cream cone. Okay, that is it.